All right, we're at the DC Comics booth with writer John Semper, who's doing Cyborg for DC Comics. So first off, always the easy question of how you came about onto the comic series.
They called me up and said, "Do you want to do the Cyborg comic?" And I said, "Who is this? How did you get my number?" And then they identified themselves, and I said, "Yes, I will do the Cyborg comic." It really was that simple.
I mean, how familiar with the character were you before you got onto the comic?
Just between you and me, not familiar at all with anything that had been done recently. I had not been reading the current comic, so I was completely in the dark as to how he had been handled in the last, I don't know, I'd say 5 years. But I'm good at getting up to speed very quickly, and since I do this for a living, it really wasn't much of a problem for me.
Okay. For you as a writer, like, how would you describe Cyborg as a character?
Well, for me, he's very exciting. Number one, because he's a person of color, and I have always made it a mandate to bring people of color into my work. I did this with Spider-Man the Animated Series 20 years ago. Got nominated for an NAACP Image Award, so this is really important to me. How would I describe him as a character? I think he's a young man who's finding his way in the world, and he's not exactly coming of age, but he's trying to figure out who he is and what he wants to be. And then, oh, by the way, he happens to be Cyborg. He happens to have both this gift and this problem, because gifts usually come with big problems. You know, with great power, there must come great responsibility. So he's really trying to figure everything out, and he's trying to figure out the biggest issue for him is whether or not he's human, fully human. We've seen this before with Cyborg throughout his history, but I think that the way we're tackling it this time is deeper and more dramatically, and with I think a more intriguing supporting cast.
The character for me, I always kind of looked at him as one of the few characters with a disability. You don't really see that at all. Is that going to be something you explore as you write your series?
Well, I have some problems with the way that he's been handled before. I no longer want to have him being pulled apart like a Tinker toy, because I think that, I'll take issue with one thing. I don't think he's disabled. I think he's a superhero. I think he just has certain weaknesses, as most superheroes do. And I think that it's unfortunate in a way that he is perceived as being disabled.
Fair. Yeah.
That's something that I intend to change. But little things like that. He won't be getting pulled apart quite so much, and he won't be seen as being quite so vulnerable. He has almost become, in recent years, just an entire Achilles body, as opposed to simply being an Achilles heel. And one thing I want to do, my mandate is to make him a hero again. Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got a varied background. You've written books, you've done animated series. I mean, you haven't written comics before, right?
Other than a few independent things that I did with some friends of mine, no. I'd never done it mainstream, and never done it for money.
So when it comes to creating stories versus books versus television versus comics, how does it actually vary for you?
No difference. No difference. Creating stories, it's no different. Executing is different. Right. Comic books are a bit like putting together a mosaic puzzle. You have to do this here and do this and your splash page can only be on this even or odd numbered pages and blah blah blah. But those are just the mechanics. And mechanics are easy to learn and easy to work out. The hard part is coming up with good stories and developing good characters, and I happen to be pretty good at that.
So, Cyborg's pretty high profile when it comes to DC characters, especially for a fairly newish character. I mean, he's been, 30-something years old at this point. Yeah. Been in comics, has a movie coming out, has the animated series with, a lot of people know him from Young Justice and Teen Titans, stuff like that. Right. Is that something that weighs on your mind as a writer, as you're going and developing the series, that there are going to be different audiences that know him from different media?
No, I don't think about it at all. In fact, I think about I am aware of the fact that he is going to have this huge presence in the Justice League movie and then subsequently his own movie. I like that. I get excited by that. I want to handle important characters like that. And I have in the past handled really important characters at important times in their development. So I don't feel pressure this is where I like to live. This is what I like to do for a living. But I am extremely aware of the fact that this movie is coming up, and that these movies, his own movie will be down the line, and in fact, that's what makes it exciting for me.
I mean, the other thing with Cyborg, he's one of the highest profile colors of character. Not too many headline their own comics. Is there some pressure to that? Is that kind of weigh on your mind as the writer of this series?
Other than the fact that I want to do it justice, no. Again, this is exactly where I want to be. 20 years ago, I handled Spider-Man when it was simply the most important thing in the Marvel Universe, before any of the movies had happened, and I like being at the forefront of pop culture. So I want him to be the most important character right now. I want this to be the most important time in his history. And as far as being a character of color, what better time to be handling a superhero of color than right this very moment, for all the obvious reasons.
I'm going to stumble on my question here. So the character has a lot of different versions. I mean, we've kind of said that people know him from different years. Right. He's also had different versions just in the comics. You've mentioned himself as he's changed over the year. Do you have a favorite version? Is there one that's kind of influencing your work more than others? I mean, it doesn't have to be comics, but maybe the television or anything else? No,
my favorite version of Cyborg is mine. I feel if I don't go into this thinking I'm going to do the very best version of Cyborg ever, the most historically significant version of Cyborg ever, then there's no point in doing it. I want to kick ass here, and I want to make this thing so great that people are referring to it, or even cannibalizing from it. The great thing about doing Spider-Man the Animated Series is I can feel the impact of what I did 20 years ago in everything that's come afterwards. I want that same thing to happen with Cyborg.
How far down the road are you thinking as far as your storytelling? Do you have it planned out for 6 issues, 12 issues?
I had started to do that, but then this wonderful, talented guy named Jeff Johns said, "No, slow down. Take it issue by issue. We're not trying to compile these into a graphic novel. That's not the goal. The goal right now is to just make each and every issue fantastic." So I'm taking it issue by issue right now.
And we'll go with the final question. You've been in entertainment for decades at this point. Yeah. You said you want to be at the forefront of pop culture. Obviously things have really kind of changed over the years as far as fan interactions and all that. Yeah. What are your thoughts as a creator of that? I imagine there's going to be a lot of eyes and criticism and nitpicking of your handling of this character because it's so high profile. As a creator, how does that kind of weigh in on you?
Well, it's already started, and it's if I weren't already familiar with social media, and if I didn't already have a presence on it, I might be taken a little bit aback. But it's predictable, people exaggerate, people have their axes to grind. One of the funny things is that, in an earlier round of press conferences, I said, I made a big issue of the fact that he was a black hero, and I wanted to explore that. And some people really went crazy, suddenly he was going to become Malcolm X or something. It's just funny, people bring their own agendas into everything you say and everything you do and everything you write and everything that's drawn. I kind of can tune that out. I'm excited about the fan interaction. I do like it. Back in the old days, you always felt like you were doing things in a vacuum, and that was no fun. Now the fan interaction is different, and it's new and exciting, and I welcome the challenge. I think it'll be kind of cool.
We'll wrap up with that, so thank you very much for talking to us.